growth in B2C companies, at least the bigger ones like Twitter, Facebook, Google, has always been product led. Like you don't see them advertising on like other platforms and gaining users, right? So somehow the product led growth conversations around B2C product has not happened because most of the big tech consumer companies, they were built on product led growth, right? So we'll define product led growth. We'll define skills for a good growth PM. And I say good with a double quote. Then we'll go deeper into few skills as a case in point. The reason I want to do this is because I think a lot of words you might be already knowing, but when I get into like one of these skills and I go deeper into it, that is when you start to understand what do I mean by like being good at these sort of skills, right? And then finally, good to great, like what should get better as you grow? I think the very easy answer is actually time, but that is not true actually. Like I think one of the analogies that I've found useful in life when I talk to people about experiences, how many years of experience do you have as walking? And this is something that I read in one of I think the blogs of Asian Paint CEO. And he asked this question, and many people actually they like people are puzzled, like how do you say that I have like 35 years of walking experience and still like somebody with a 30 years of walking experience is more better at walking than me, right? So that's how our jobs are. Like time is one of the factors, but what makes you good to great over time, I think you need to define very carefully. Otherwise, you'll always rely on that single number of experience as the key metric for getting better, right? So we will talk a little bit around that, and then I have some recommendations to share, right? The recommendations I will actually make more richer after the session, and I'll also be sharing the slides on the event group, right? So you can find it there also. So I think the first question I ask anybody who is talking about like product and growth is, okay, well, what is your experience with product and growth? Because a lot of times, like I have felt myself not qualified to talk about few things that people ask. When I was young, yeah, I felt qualified to talk about almost everything. Like I used to give a lot of gyan and all, but over time, I feel that I have gotten that, I won't say wisdom, but that knowledge that, okay, I don't know everything. And I think my path might be one of the ways which is good, but there are like other ways which are better and all. Right. But let me just give you slightly context. The reason this slide is important is so that you can relate to what I am saying and you can ask relevant questions around these things if you have a question, right? So I think the first was Upgrad. Upgrad is the first company I worked as a PM. I was also the first PM for the company, and I was very lucky, I would say, to get there. I think I saw the company growing from zero to like $20 million in revenue in first 3 years. And I eventually became director of growth. I was looking at like growing the revenue as a metric for the org, working with marketing and sales team. And that's where I learned and got very, very interested in growth. I already had a data background. So I have built like data teams at housing.com back in 2014. Then I built data and data science team at Upgrad. So data was my stronghold, which I feel also pushed me towards growth because growth is very, very data heavy. I moved to MX Player. MX Player, I was managing the daily active users. So revenue growth first, then daily active users. And MX Player is a huge app, like 500 million downloads, 50 million daily active users. The idea was, how do we shift these daily active users to streaming daily activities, streaming DAO, right? And the goal was to take it from 2 million to 10 million in 6 months. It looked like an impossible goal, but we eventually did it, right? And that was MX Player. I was leading growth for MX Player, streaming services. Then Flipkart, I have built games. I'll just zoom past few things so that I don't bore you with Flipkart. I've led games, gamification, and then assistant AI, right? So we are building shopping assistant and voice search for Flipkart. So I was leading that charter. Unacademy, I lead end-to-end user experiences. It's basically the organic growth, then free learner experience, and then paid learner experience, right? So end-to-end like user growth. Apart from this, some of you might know me from Tech Simplified. Like I wrote this book during COVID, and I think it became a hit for some reason, because honestly, like I just printed like 1,000 copies for first 2 years, and it has now sold 8,000 copies already. So yeah, thanks for being a supporter in that. And then many of you would know me from Growth Catalyst, by the way. Like I know people who are interested in growth, keep reading Growth Catalyst. I have been writing this blog for 3 years. For last 1 year, it has been a very shaky journey because of a newborn at home and an academy. As a startup, like we are also kind of doing a lot of things. But I'm going to start writing continuously on this going forward. So feel free to ask me around these things. This is like the plethora of things where I can feel confident to answer you. Most of the times I try to answer through a framework that can be applied. But if nothing, I can tell you the nuances of what worked, what didn't work here. Let's move on. Session guidelines, very quickly, be very honest in polls. It's anonymous. The aggregate data will help you benchmark where you are. It will help me understand like where the audience is, and then accordingly sort of get into details of certain things. Drop questions in chat. If they look like a blocker, I'll pick it, or else I'll move on. And at the end of the session, we can pick it. Don't worry if you don't understand a term. A lot of you might be beginners in growth or PM. You should not worry. Just focus on like the message. The message is very clear and crisp throughout the session. Focus on the direction. Focus on the message. You can search for the terms later when I share the slides, and you can go and Google and all that, right? And then have fun, right? That's most important. Like if you're feeling shy from putting something in chat, like I'm going too fast or doing something else, you can put it in, message. You can message me directly. I'll read it and I'll try to improvise, right? So have fun. So that's basically session guidelines. Next 45 minutes, let's move into the content. The first thing I want to start with is how many years of product experience you have. I'll take 30 seconds. You can see the poll here. You can just put the poll. Fifteen more seconds. We already have 67% participants. 7 more seconds. Great. I'll end the poll and I will share results for you. So we have like 10% no experience in product. I'm assuming you're trying to move into product. Good for you that you are thinking about growth already. Less than a year is great. 2 to 4 years, it's a very solid composition, 30, 40, 20. Like I have never seen this composition. Most of the times it's heavily skewed towards like 1 year, 2 years, right? But great, let's move on. I feel we have the right quorum. So I think the first thing you start as a PM, right? And in PM, like you have to, like, these are the few of the things that you have to be good at, like product design, tech understanding, execution or project management, verbal or written communication, and an understanding of metric, right? This is where every PM starts, because this is something that is tested in your interviews. And this is something that you're supposed to do before you become a PM. Now, what I'm saying is you actually graduate to a growth PM. You don't become a growth PM overnight. Like just because you get into a growth role does not make you a growth PM, right? You graduate to it. And but a lot of times, like I always failed to explain people what a growth PM is, at least in my initial days, because people are like, oh, you work in marketing as a PM. Okay. You are a growth hacker. Okay. So a lot of things that I actually kind of heard, I could not explain very well. My sense is after this session, you would be able to at least explain that. So first, let's look at the term growth hacking, right? Because this is something which is very, very prevalent in growth circles, including like marketing and product. Now, the myth is actually like growth hacking is product growth. That is the biggest myth, I would say, around product growth. Like most of the people equate it with growth hacking. Okay, you are going to change few things here and there. You are going to change the copy slightly, and you are going to hack in some way to get more users and all that. You're going to trick people into inviting more people, right? The biggest example for this was, for those of you who already can see, like this is Airbnb posting its listings into Craigslist, right? And this is back in 2013. Craigslist is a big platform, right? It's a profitable platform. It generates $1 billion of revenue. It has like billions and billions of users. Airbnb, to get sort of more and more views and visits, it kind of found some open API for Craigslist and started posting its listing on Craigslist. People saw this on Craigslist, they went back to Airbnb, and that's how they got the initial traction. And this is told as the story, sort of to convince us that, okay, you should do growth hacking, right? Now, the matter of the fact is, Airbnb has not done much of growth hacking after that. Like, that was the initial thing that Airbnb does. And that is true about a lot of growth hacking silver bullets that we heard here about, right? It's basically people doing something which worked, and then basically they are not using that as a strategy for growth, right? Because the thing is, like, I think this is one of the quotes from a movie. If it were that easy, everybody would do it. And that's the thing. Growth is not easy. Like, if growth would be easy, if it would be a hack, everybody would be doing it. But nobody is able to actually grow in this economy, especially. Like, it's very hard for companies to grow. And that's why growth hacking is not product growth. Like, product growth is very holistic. Product growth is very sustainable and all that, right? And most importantly, it is scientific. It actually tries to understand why something happens, right? And to give you an example, like, why is a very generic term. This is what I mean. This kind of cartoon explains it best. Like, you pull a lever, you get some electricity shock, and normal person is like, okay, I should not do this, right? This is like, there is a phrase in Hindi, "Doodh ka jala chhach bhi phuk phuk kar peeta hai," which translates to something like, somebody who has taken a burnt milk, like, they would not even dare drink buttermilk or something like that. But a scientist actually asks if it actually happens every time. Like, was it the liver that caused it, or was it like there was just some lightning that struck them and all that? So they actually investigate why something happens. In product growth, I think that's the first thing I want you to remember, because once you start treating it as a science, start treating it as very scientific, you would actually grow exponentially as compared to somebody who just does something. If it hits, great. If it does not, fine, we will do something else and moves on, right? You don't have to move on actually from whatever you ship, whatever you launch. You have to actually understand why it did work, by the way. Why it did work, we didn't ask enough, and why it didn't work, right? Both. Be a scientist. But then the other question is basically, then why do we talk about growth hacks so often? Like, of course, it's a popular term, right? Like, a lot of good people have talked about that. A lot of people who are more credible than me have talked about that. What is that about? Like, how do you counter that question? Like, the Google trend shows that it has been rising steadily for last 4 or 5 years. And the answer to that is, actually, I've been thinking about that. The accidents happen in science. Like, penicillin was discovered accidentally. Radium was discovered accidentally. A lot of discovery. In fact, cornflakes, I was having cornflakes this morning. Like, cornflakes was discovered accidentally, right? Such a like omnipresent product now. But accidents happen in science as long as you are on the lookout. Like, you can't discover penicillin if you are not looking for penicillin, which means if you don't understand science, you won't be able to discover it. If you don't understand biology, you won't be able to discover it. So even for growth hacking to happen, you have to understand product growth as a whole thing. And then, of course, you can get lucky at some time. Something worked which you didn't imagine in your dreams, and that's fine, right? So that's around growth hacking. Like, growth hacking is not product growth. That's a myth. Product growth is more scientific. And of course, growth hacking has a value, but it's because, just like in science, accidents happen in growth as well. Like, you get lucky someday, or you get unlucky some other day, right? Let's move to product-led growth then, right? Now that we have created so much hype around product-led growth and product growth, let's move to that. So this is a product growth cycle, right? So very simply, like, you get an insight through qualitative or quantitative. Qualitative means research, talking to people, and all. Quantitative means data, like hardcore, like binary data. You get insights, you get some ideas based on that insight. So my insight could be that people need to learn about product growth The idea that I got was, okay, let me do a session and see if people register and come for product growth. Some 500 people registered, some 100 odd people came to attend this session. And then but this was one of the ideas. How did I prioritize this idea? I could have built a course. I could have written a book and something, right? You prioritize that list and say, okay, this is something that I'm going to do. You experiment with that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to write a blog post. I'm going to do something else. And then depending on the response, you actually follow up on the insight, like just modify it a little bit and then go back to idea. This is the loop that keeps churning in product growth cycle. The biggest difference is actually the experiment, right? You have to be very experimental in nature. Like you have to actually test it out so that you know that you're moving in the right direction, right? In absence of an experiment, you might do something that feels right because of the timing, but because it does not causes actual growth. It was just timed right in terms of that. You might read the numbers wrong and then move in the wrong direction, right? So you have to be more scientific. You have to do a lot of experiment. But other than that, this more or less actually looks like normal product building, right? Like you might be asking, I think I showed it to one of my friends and he was like, dude, how is this different from like how we build normal products? He was just telling me how we build normal products. And like that's a great thing. I think the only difference possibly is basically you do all of this and you make sure that the curve on the right side actually moves up. And it could be a user curve, it could be a revenue curve. This is a user curve, daily active user curve for Slack, right? So as long as like you are doing product development and it is very tightly coupled to user or revenue growth, that is basically the product-led growth. Using product, you are growing something, right? That's the basic of it. Now let's move to the good part. What are the skills of a good growth PM, right? So to understand what are the skills, you have to understand the difference between like PM and a growth PM. And like we already covered, you start as a PM with these 4 or 5 things. And at this level, you are rewarded mostly for execution, which is basically you can take a project and you can execute it very well. You can manage it. You can talk to engineers. You can talk to designers. You can do a lot of things and you execute this whole thing very, very well. But when it comes to growth PM, you are rewarded for impact. That's the biggest difference, by the way. Like if I had a one-liner, as a PM, you are rewarded for execution. As a growth PM, it's always impact. Like you are not rewarded for shipping things. You are not rewarded for like doing 10 things in 1 month and all that. Those are input metrics and those are fine, but the actual rewards actually happen for impact, right? Just give me a moment. Sorry. So when it comes to then growth, if you want to create impact, it's a harder thing, right? And which is where I'm going to just take some time to explain you what different things mean and how do they move impact, right? So the first thing is a very, very good stronghold on qualitative and quantitative data. What it means is you should be excellent at user research and understanding them. And you should also be excellent at quantitative data or reading data. And we'll get deeper into this skill, by the way. So hold on for that. And I'll explain like what does it mean by being strong at qualitative and quantitative data. The second is you should be good with product versus feature growth. So if you are a PM in a Series A, Series B, Series C company, what you are doing would be working on is product growth. At Upgrade, I was working at product growth. At MX Player, I was working at a feature growth. I was looking at streaming DAO, whereas there was daily active users. At Flipkart, I was looking at games daily active users versus Flipkart already was a product, right? So depending on the stage of the company you are in, you will be working on either a product growth or feature growth, right? So it's and the strategies for both are very different. Like they don't apply. Like for product growth, you have full freedom of notifications. You can do 5 more things on the home page, like, and you can do the positioning of the product that fits, like whatever brings them back, whatever you want to promote, you have full control. In feature growth, you don't have that control. Like Flipkart won't let me send games notifications 2 times a day, but it will let like send commerce notifications 10 times a day, right? Same, because you have to protect the core business and then grow this feature. up to a certain point, unless it starts showing a lot of promise, and then you go on the other side. So product versus feature growth will have different strategies for growth, and you have to understand that as a growth PM. The third is ideation, prioritization, experimentation, right? Ideation, so usually we prioritize and experiment as PMs. I feel ideation has to be very, very strong for a growth PM. You have to be an idea machine. And how do you become an idea machine? That is something also where I'll go deep into. Like these are like a couple of areas where I feel I should get deep into, because they are going to immediately help you in your job today. Growth modeling, like how do you model growth and define the right target, right? And one of the instances that happened with me is I have seen people take targets which look good. Like, okay, we are at 2 million daily active users. Let's get at 5 million daily active users by next quarter. Let's hit this number by next year, right? And these are just coming out of air. Like there is no basis for that. But when you create a growth model, you actually can predict to a T that this is the daily active users we are going to get, basis the number of new people we are acquiring, and basis the retention of these new people. It's simple maths, right? It's very mathematical. So growth modeling is very important for you to know if you want to create impact, like, because then you can measure what is the impact that is possible basis today. And then what do I need to change? How much do I need to change to create the impact that I'm expecting for tomorrow? You need to understand organic traction channels and go to market. This is very important for entrepreneurs and like startup sort of PMs, right? You have to get after SEO, you have to get after content, you have to get after product tools, which actually give you a lot of growth. And in US, if you look at some of the companies, they have done it extremely well. Like HubSpot has built a tool. In fact, like one of the real estate websites, Zillow, has built a pricing tool. Like they have built tools, they have built like SEO authority and all that. And that is their go-to-market. And that's why they don't burn a lot of money and they're profitable, right? In Indian startup system, I have not met a company, a single company, barring maybe Zerodha, barring InterviewBit, possibly Scalar Academy. They are also doing some sort of paid marketing now, but I think when they started for the first 5 years, they were not doing that. I think barring few exceptions, everybody goes after the paid marketing. Why? Because we have to grow fast. We don't have enough expertise to grow these organic traction channels and all that, right? But think of the competitive advantage a company can have if they can grow this channel, right? And I speak this from my experience at housing.com also. Like the biggest moat that existing real estate companies like 99 Acres and Magic Bricks had was they appeared on the first page of Google when somebody searched about 1 BHK flat in Bangalore, right? And you can't take that away. You can keep shelling out money, but what they're getting is for free and they can make some profit from it. Whereas you can't even make break even, right? So over time, like organic traction channels and your go-to-market strategies, they actually become a very, very strong moat, right? The next is funnels, acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral. Like that's basically the pirate metrics you should know. But what I've seen PMs doing is looking at micro funnels, which is, okay, this is my feature. Let me see like how the funnel looks like. You should actually think about the ARR, loops, flywheels. Like these are some of the concepts you should know to grow your product. And finally, this is seventh is, and the reason I put it at 7 is this is the most important number, which is like, how do you improve activation, engagement, and resurrection? This is your core job as a PM. Like this is something that nobody else is going to do, neither marketing nor sales. No other team is going to do this. You have to improve activation, engagement, and resurrection for your users. More often than not, people come up with a feature list, which is not a great way to solve this problem, because retention as a problem is so hard that I have seen people spending like years and years on the problem and still moving it by like 0.5% or 1 percentage point. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is the mindset they are in. The mindset that they are in is of incrementality. Like, let me add this new feature. Let me kind of tell these people a new thing, or change the copy, or send more notifications, and my retention will move. The problem is it's a hard problem. So you have to take hard calls. You have to go like step jumps into your experience to improve retention. think something like Airbnb, right? Airbnb's retention improved over time because as they launched into more geographies, which is a step change, people start coming more often. Because if I'm now planning my trip for Europe, I can go to Airbnb. If I'm going to Australia, I can go to Airbnb. That was not true in their initial years. What's more, as they added super hosts, as they increased listings and all that, the marketplace retention will go up. So real changes, real value will bring like activation, engagement, and retention changes. And then how do you craft strategies for this and convince others? Like that is something which you need to do in an excellent manner as a growth PM. The next is market analysis and competitive strategy. You're not operating in silos. Like no matter what people say that, okay, don't be competitor focused, your competition is going to affect like whatever your daily active users are. COVID is going to affect like how you grow. And once it starts opening, it has affected all the tech companies, how it grows. You can't sit in a silo and say, no, we will not focus on external factors. We will not focus on the market. We will do the best customer experience possible for our product and it will work. Of course, you can do, yeah, it can work a lot of times, but it will not work a lot of times as well. That's the thing. Right. So market analysis and competitive strategy is something that you need to understand. And there's not a lot of literature around it. Like maybe Michael Porter wrote about it. After that, I think Hamilton Helmer, like 7 Powers, wrote about it. There are just like 3 or 4 things that you need to understand. You'll be good at market analysis and competitive strategy. But because we don't have that information on how to be good at it, we often don't do it, right? The next is positioning and pricing. Like, is pricing hurting what you are doing, right? So for example, a very simple example in EdTech has happened, which is like Byju's and Unacademy priced their products at a similar level. Physics Wala came with a very, very small, like lower pricing, like 2,000, 3,000 rupees worth of courses versus Unacademy 40,000. How does positioning and pricing helps or hurts Unacademy? There is something that a growth PM should be able to map. And when I say map, not like subjectively, not arguing it out like a lawyer, actually like doing research. Like there's something called pricing analysis where you can map value versus percentage of people who feel like this product should be priced on this. And like there are 3 or 4 curves and you will come at points which will say this is a sweet spot for pricing, right? It's very, very important to apply the science into positioning and pricing, things which look very subjective but are actually objective, right? And finally, my favorite, like consumer psychology and gamification. Like if you can crack this one, yeah, sky is the limit. Not just in terms of understanding your product and consumers, but actually understanding the world. Just beware of one thing. Like if you read Thinking Fast and Slow and other things by these people, you will realize that it's very hard to actually, it's very hard to kind of win our own biases, right? So that's one thing you have to be careful about. But at least if you understand the psychology and gamification and all that, even if it does not help you personally in product, you'll be able to understand people's motivations and everything very, very carefully, right? And consumer psychology takes years because I think even Thinking Fast and Slow, at least it's a book which took me like 3 months to finish. And I usually finish books like in a couple of weeks, right? So this will take you longer time to observe and process and everything. But this is very fun also. Like this is like a lot of stories, a lot of interesting anecdotes that you'll find in these books of consumer psychology. And you would actually love it as a PM. So these are like, these are possibly the things that you need to graduate to a growth PM. Not possibly, these are actually things which you need to graduate to growth PM. If you take 10 or 10, like you are already there. If not, you at least now have a sense of where to go from here, right? Now, very quickly, like just to get a sense of the audience. Okay, this was, let me launch this poll and let me go back to the previous slide. Take some time, like not more than 30 seconds, and tell me like how many of these things are you confident with? Wow. And this is my social experiment, by the way. I'm going to share the results with you in full honesty, right? I feel like you also knowing where you stand will give you more confidence. The data actually will give you more confidence if you are feeling bad. So be honest. Wow, 100%, 66% answered. I'm going to do it for just 10 more seconds and I'm just going to close it. Oops. Great. Let me close it and let me share results. So around 12% of participants are 0 to 1. This is in sync with, I think, 11% of people who are 0 years of experience. So that is fine. 2 to 4 is 54%. 5 to 7 is 31%. 8 to 10 is 4%. So I believe the majority is at 2 to 4, which is a sweet spot to be in, because honestly, like if you ask me a couple of years back, even a couple of years back, before I started writing Growth Catalyst, I would have done myself in 2 to 4, like not more than that. So it's a good place to start. You can definitely move to like 8 or 10 if you just be ultra focused on this for, let's say, 6 to 8 months. Okay, let me stop sharing this and let's move on to the next thing. Now, I think another question which my wife asked, like, why does one need to learn so much? Like, right? And this is something that I have experienced personally. I think I can relate with this cartoon because I have tried to sell like this machine gun to kings and queens. And they're like, no, we have a battle to fight. We are in a hurry. Let us go and fight this battle with swords, right? So I think the reason you need to learn so much is because if you don't understand everything, you might be fighting with a sword. Whereas, like more often than not, and this is my realization, believe me, like after I talked to some of the folks, like I was talking to one of the PMs in Spotify, like one in Meta, actually, we have some Meta folks here. What you realize is like Silicon Valley is way ahead of Indian startup ecosystem in terms of their knowledge and understanding. Think of it like this, right? They started in 90s. We started in what, 2010? They're 20 years ahead of us. And if we can understand what they are doing now, like you'll not believe, right? I was doing this course in Reforge, and in that one, they break activation, which we believe is a single metric, into 3 parts. And after reading that, I was able to break into 4 parts. They break activation into how do you set up people for activation? How do you get them to experience the aha moment? How do you create a habit out of it? Like that whole thing is activation, right? And I was like, how does this apply for every product that I've worked? I have always chosen activation as a single metric. But now there are 3 metrics for it. Like there are 3 metrics. I can break it into 3 metrics and possibly more. I can actually introduce somewhere between aha moment and habit moment, another thing, right? That gives me a good sense of where exactly the problem is. Once you break a funnel into micro sort of parts, it becomes very easy to understand where the problem is, right? I feel those frameworks are like machine guns. We have to learn a lot from Silicon Valley and like other practitioners. And we have to employ those machine guns to solve India specific problems. Because one of the things that at least I have started believing in now is India is not going to be like 10 companies going to $1 trillion valuation. It will be like 1,000 companies going to $1 billion or a $10 billion valuation, because it's so diverse. And that means we need people who can identify these problems and solve them. Like all the templatized things from Silicon Valley have already happened. Like, what are you going to grow into? And some of them have not even served the needs of the users. Think share chat, right? It is meeting our underserved needs in India, which is 90% of India. Or think Koo, like I think Koo founder just other day wrote like how Koo is different from Twitter. And there are people who are able to see the opportunities because they have learned at least the mental models and frameworks to identify, okay, this is not going to work there. For this segment, if you want to grow, this is how you are going to grow. And the central thesis is always around market research and growth, right? which is where I feel like it's a superpower to unlock as a PM. You graduate as a growth PM, you become so good. And this is, I think, Abraham Maslow's quote, which is like, to a person with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So limited tools, everything will look like you will force fit those tools to those things, right? Now, time for a quick story, right? I think the reason I have so much conviction around this is, and this is like, I have worked on games at a couple of places, so I won't disclose the name, but I will just the same tell you the story. So when I joined the team, the game's daily active users was measured as the number of people who were coming to that particular game, a particular game, let's say. And then the expectation was, if today game's daily active user is, let's say, 1 million, we will reach 5 million in next 5 months. And I did a simple thing. I just created a growth model. I said, okay, on a daily basis, 20,000 new users are coming. This is the retention for these users, these new users. Let's do a very mathematical calculation in 5 months. Where does this numbers reach? And this number was not reaching beyond 2.3, 2.4 million daily active. 2 to 2.4. The aspiration was 5 million. So there was a big gap between where the product was and where it needed to go. And that was my first call out. We can't chase 5 million. Like, the matter of the fact is, for last 1 year, this has stayed flat. Every quarter you have taken a 5 million goal and you have failed. So there is no point taking another 5 million goal and failing again. Let's be realistic. Let's choose 3 million. And let's also try to build some step jumps into the whole product. And we actually moved from a, let's say, building single games to a platform approach. We launched like, rather than 2 to 3 games, we launched 20 games and all that. And it actually, at least temporarily, there was a good boost and all. I don't know about the follow-up numbers. I left the place. But my sense is, even in measurement, and these are very highly like, these are highly experienced people, right? Like, I'm talking about like people with 15 years of experience, 20 years of experience. And they are kind of taking these targets, missing them again and again and again and again and again, because they don't have the right tools to employ and say with confidence that, okay, this is not possible. Let's talk about how to make this possible. But unless we do something very significant, this is not going to change, right? That's one of the ways. And then you keep encountering such stories every week, every month, or right. So next 15 minutes, let's try to get deeper into few skills, right? Now, I have told you like what the skills are. I want to get you a sense of like, what does it mean by being good at something that most of you will feel you are already good at. And I believe you are actually good at. I have like picked slightly more advanced stuff. So don't worry if you don't know most of it. So first is stronghold on qual and quant data, right? Let's start with qual data, right? Quant data, actually, quantitative data. So what you see, the most frequent problems I've seen in quant data, and you can go and verify for your product, is the top level metrics are not defined carefully. We will go into the details. There is not enough focus on understanding end-to-end sort of metrics: acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral. People don't understand, PMs don't understand the data pipeline, the tools and limitation of the tools. For example, Google Analytics has a lot of limitations. It's a terrible tool for product analytics. Yet I see a lot of companies just using Google Analytics. Amplitude is terrible for attribution marketing attribution. Yet people will go to Amplitude or Mixpanel, they'll say, oh, this is the source of truth. No, that is not the source of truth. You have to understand attribution fundamentally to say this is the source of truth, right? So there are limitations. And then relying on aggregate numbers. I have a beautiful story around this, but we'll share that later. I think all of us, including me, actually see aggregate numbers more often than we should not. So the top metric, right? So one example is bump. And I was listening to this podcast with David Libb. David Libb is the product person who built Google Photos. Such a beautiful product, such an amazing product. But he started with Bump, and Bump was basically contact sharing for iPhone. And it kind of grew viral, like 100 million downloads and all that. It all grew through organic word of mouth. Again, another signal. You are not paying money to kind of gain users. So why would you doubt they have not come for the real value you are offering? But after 2 or 3 years, when they tried to monetize, they could not monetize. And then they went deeper into numbers. And what they saw was a lot of people were opening, which was their definition of daily active users. But they were not doing the core action, which is they were not sharing contact or yay. And when they talk to these people, they're like, yeah, sometimes accidentally I open it because it's besides this other app which I'm trying to open, right? And they're like, okay, what, like, so we were thinking that our DAO is strong and we have a good product market fit. We can monetize any day. Now that's not true. What do we do? They moved to like, they went to the top 100 users, they talked to them. And what they realized is they were using Bump for something else, which is photo sharing. That's where they built Flock. I don't know if you remember Flock. It was, again, a very popular app. And then Flock got acquired by Google in 2013. And this guy went on to build Google Photos. Amazing guy. Like, you should definitely listen to him. Just Google like David Libb, and you would be able to see one of his podcasts. He is possibly, like, I would rate him as one of the best folks in product. In terms of articulation, at least, see, I don't know how he operates, but what he teaches is actually very, very solid, very fundamental. So this is where, like, the daily active means active, right? Activity. Active means activity. It's not opening the app, not any activity, right? And that's a fallacy every app I have worked with goes through. Like, everybody is defining daily active users. Most of the time, it does not hurt because usually, like, active to core action is not a big gap for these products. But if you're building a new thing, you might as well be very, very particular about defining the active sort of cohort and then measuring that and measuring their retention rather than measuring, like, if you're suppose doing a feature, right? A lot of people, because they're using the app, they might accidentally click on the feature and you count them as active. You build a growth model on that, and then the model fails. Why? Because they're not active. They're just tapping on this and then immediately doing backtracking, right? So it's very important for you to define the top level metrics very, very carefully. The second is understanding AR end to end, right? Now, I don't want to kind of assert anything. I just want to understand, right? And this is my hunch. I'm validating my hypothesis that how many of you actually remember today, like, what are the major channels of acquisition and what is the customer acquisition cost on those? There's the poll for you. It will be live for 15, 20 more seconds. So yeah. Wow. You remember the CAC? I think this number is at 46%. People who remember CAC. I'm truly impressed. Great. We have a good quorum. 44 people actually remember CAC, which is amazing, by the way. It invalidates my hypothesis. But yeah, yet, like, the majority does not and is in confusion. So it's not that weak hypothesis. It's okay. But the idea is that acquisition, like, we often forget acquisition as PMs and we often forget revenue as PMs. We focus on activation, retention, and then referrals. Referrals we love because, yeah, it's a product-led growth. And the possibly the strongest and simplest product-led growth that we have been taught about, right? But if you understand the acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral end to end, couple of things it does is, one, business people will never tell you that, okay, you as a PM don't understand our priorities, because you are able to understand revenue and map it to your core things, right? The second is, with marketing, you'll be able to understand where are people coming from. Let me give you an example, right? For Upgrad, and this is something which is sort of out in public, so I'm sharing that. Most of the acquisition happens through Google search now. I think when we started, we were trying LinkedIn, Facebook, every channel you try, but Google search. And a lot of people might say, okay, in EdTech, let's do Google search only because that works for Upgrad, right? Now that has a couple of problems with it. Once, you don't understand target group very, very extensively if you don't understand the acquisition channel, and you try to just port analogies. Because the matter of the fact is, Upgrad is selling it to professionals who have computers, laptops. And think of how difficult it is to Google search on your phone versus your laptop. Most of the people are researching serious courses on laptop, not on their phone, right? Which is where, like, if you go to K-12, which is like children studying in 10, 12th and all, Google, they're not searching on Google. Like they are mostly like going on YouTube. They're looking for teachers. They're looking for topics. So YouTube becomes a very strong channel of acquisition, which it has been for Unacademy and even Physics Wala, right? And then the other thing is Facebook, where the parents are there, because parents also decide for their children that this is what they should be studying on. So fundamentally, you also get a sense of who your audience is if you start understanding acquisition channels. Because these people, if they are spending time on these channels, like what does it mean? Very simple example, another, right? TikTok, for example, has started eating share into search, possibly the first company to do that with Google. And what has happened is the Gen Zers, and after that, I don't know what we call them. We are millennials. I am millennial, like we are not millennials, I am millennial. But Gen Zers, they're searching on TikTok around lifestyle products like gym, best gyms in vicinity and all that, because they want a visual video that people are shooting in that gym or in that bakery or something like that. So they are eating into this share of Google. Now, if you understand that as a PM, this does a couple of things for you. If you are building, let's say, Yelp or Zomato, you would actually want to move to video because that's a lifestyle product. And that is a great insight. Nobody is doing that. Zomato tried something with videos, but yeah, it was not TikTok-like. It was not like I can search and I can see. But if you start thinking, that is like the germ of an idea, which will never happen if you're just sitting in and looking at data and numbers and all that, right? So understanding things end to end actually helps you a lot, which is where the central point is. The last is data pipeline and tools, right? I feel PMs focus a lot on the tools, which is Amplitude, Mixpanel, GA, Heap, and they kind of understand that and they use that. But most of the errors and most of the problems happen at the source. Now, if you are capturing data in the wrong way, you are almost always going to look at the wrong data and you are going to sort of derive the wrong insights. And I have seen this happening enough time to say that it's not an exception. Like you as a PM has to understand the event definition, how they're captured, when they are triggered, and everything, right? If you don't understand that, I wouldn't say like you have that sort of data then. Don't look at the pipeline and all. You can leave that on engineers. If you're curious, great. If you have read Tech Simplified and you want to just explore the architecture, great. But not beyond that. But definitely look at how data is instrumented and then how data is read. Just a quick poll. I will actually pass this poll. No need. But if you're not involved in event nomenclature today, go and get involved. And I don't mean analytics coming to you and telling you, okay, this is how we are defining events. Are you fine? You're like, yeah, great. No, not that. Event nomenclature means you are defining it in a prescribed fashion. Like there is actually a way to define it. Like these should go into properties. This should go into name. And then because this is how I'm going to segment this, right? Everything should be defined by the PM or at the first, and then going forward also, like PM should be actually writing that. Unfortunately, I've graduated to a manager of managers job where I can't do it personally, but yeah, it actually breaks my heart when like PMs don't do this, right? The last one is relying on aggregate numbers. This is basically World War II story, 1940s. A lot of pilots are actually getting into accidents. And the root cause for that, which people find, is cockpits are very hard to operate. Cockpits are not designed well, they're not very intuitive. And because of that, rather than, let's say it happens with doors, right? Rather than pulling, you're pushing. And rather than pushing, you're pulling. Because it's badly designed. It does not fit into our mental models. The crashes are happening. So what happens is a set of mathematicians and designers actually sit and they say, okay, these are all the pilots. Let's take their height, weight, reach, shoulders, chest, everything. Let's average that out and let's build a cockpit for that. Massive, massive failure. Why? Because none of the pilots is actually average. If you look at the data, like somebody might have a higher height, but lower torso, bigger shoulders, but legs are shorter. When you look at data in aggregate, it might not fit a single user that you have. And then they went back. One of the mathematicians actually called out the flaw that, okay, no, we can't design for average. We have to design in an opinionated manner. This, I believe, was the biggest product management shift that happened in that era. It's like we have to build for a particular segment. And then we have to only recruit pilots who fit that particular trait, right? That's why in Air Force, you see like your arm length should be this much, your leg length should be this much. It's not because they want people, they're not biased. They are doing it because the cockpits are designed in certain fashion. And that is my message to PMs, growth PMs especially. Don't look at aggregate numbers. Look at the like user level data. Look at the log level data. Look at what a user is doing. Yeah? Like if they are searching 20 times the same thing again and again, you know something is very, very wrong, even if it's a single user. But if you look at aggregate, oh, on an average, people are searching 2.2 times. Great, we are good. No. A lot of people are not searching at all. And then there are people who are searching 20 times, and then there are people who are searching 1 time. It's just that the people who are searching 20 times, their pain is much, much, much higher compared to people who are searching 1 time or 0 times. And you didn't solve for that. You didn't solve for the users who needed your product most because you looked at aggregate data. So don't look at aggregate data. Look at aggregate data, but don't look at aggregate data. Let's come to qual, right? I think leading questions in interviews and leaving questions in interviews. Like those are the two fallacies in qual. And then the other fallacy is assuming users are rational decision makers. I think very quickly is this. Leading or leaving questions. I had a business idea last month. I talked to my friends, I talked to my wife, and they're like, great, amazing. And then I launched it and nobody bought it, right? That's like the story of 90% of startups. And that is because you can't do research like research. It's scientific, right? Remember, it's scientific. It's not a validation criteria. It's not there to make you happy, right? But if you don't leave those biases out, if you don't understand yourself, your biases, I think you're going to make this mistake more often than not. Assuming users are rational, the rationality does not explain one thing on this chart. Can you figure out which one? Like put it in chat if you already. A rational user would never drink one of these in the soft drink market. Can you think? Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Red Bull, Nescafe, Gatorade, Sprite, Fanta, Tropicana, Mountain Dew. Nescafe is close enough. I would say like Red Bull. The third, I think, I don't know, it tastes like sweat or something. Like first time I think they were promoting in college and I drank it and I was like, what is this? Like I'm not going to drink again in my life. And still like Red Bull is like, it says, it matches no rational decision. Like people say it creates some heart problems, it creates a lot of things. Still third largest soft drink in the market. Of course, there is some narrative around sugar and all now, but we know that Red Bull, like it has a lot of elements which might cause a lot of problems, right? So, Kalyan, I'm going to take your question in the end, but yeah, that was the call out actually, in case that was not clear. That be opinionated in product decisions, just build for your target users. The second is ideation, prioritization, experimentation, right? Now, ideation made the biggest problem, and I'm focusing on ideation because as a growth PM, you're supposed to come with lots of bad and good ideas. The first is poor recall on decisions, which is, I'm going to explain what. Not understanding users' job to be done. Now, people might be familiar with this framework, right? We are going to revisit this, so just hold for a moment. And not looking enough externally. These are three major problems with ideation, I see. Poor recall. Now, recall is a concept I borrow from data science. What it means is, suppose there are 100 males in a group, in an auditorium, and you are able to identify 75 mails through a face detection software, your recall is 75 by 100. Of the total things possible, total mails possible in that audio region, you identify 75%. If that is 10, that is 10%, 10 by 100. So that is recall. Now, for PM role, right? If a problem has n good solutions, what percentage of them were evaluated by your PM? Because if you can have exhaustive list of solutions, it's actually very possible to come with the right solution. But what happens is we often go with the first solution or first idea we have to a problem, right? So recall is one thing that you should keep measuring yourself as a PM, because this will force you to ask this question: have I exhausted all solutions? Am I making a hasty decision and all that? And bias for action and all, by the way, like for all the goodness there is for bias for action, this is the biggest fallacy for bias for action. If you don't think carefully, like, you might miss a golden opportunity. The second is job to be done, right? So job to be done, I think very simply, rather than going to definition, let me explain it to you. Customers are buying a skateboard. Let's say you are a product manager for a skateboard. You feel that, okay, my titanium hardware, my Swiss bearings, and these wheels, like this is such a beautiful product. People are going to buy this and all that. It looks so zazzy. It's so slick, so bright and all that. But the job to be done for the end user is to impress, like maybe their crush, their wife, their colleagues, because they just want to zoom and the people will be like, wow, what an amazing skater he is, right? He or she is. Now, once you understand job to be done, it shifts your perspective of ideas. The ideas that you can come by designing a more beautiful or robust skateboard are limited. Because why are they limited? Because yeah, apart from titanium, what are you going to go with? Maybe diamond, if you're selling to very rich customers. Like you'll come with very suboptimal ideas when you think about that. But when you start thinking about the job to be done is to look cool. You can make them look cool in a lot of ways. Like you can create training videos. You can give them 1 hour workshop. You can do a lot of things which are out of the box. And they will really get the job done for the customer. Right? So the number of ideas that you can come up with by going to job to be done framework. What is the job that the customer wants to do? Rather than what is the need my product solves, or what is my product and like, how do I make it better? Go to the customer, look at their jobs to be done, and then figure out backwards. Same for social media, right? You're getting bored. Like Mark Zuckerberg keeps saying, and to a large extent that is true, by the way. I believe like his conviction that we want to build a more connected world. Right? But now we know that Facebook and Instagram, for example, they are more like a tool to sort of you getting bored, you opening that and you getting dopamine hit, and then that makes it very addictive. The job to be done for the consumer has shifted from getting connected to getting rid of your boredom. And getting rid of your boredom is where I believe TikTok saw the opportunity. Because look at what they have built, right? They have built 15-second videos, instantly swipeable, very strong recommendation engine. Like those are the most effective ways to kill your boredom. And that's why TikTok is growing so fast. That's why YouTube, despite having a more higher quality content, is like losing it to TikTok when it comes to ad revenue and engagement, right? So that's the job to be done. Right? And the final is not looking externally enough. Now, this is a person, like, if you already know who this person is, you can put it in chat, but he used a yellow legal pad, which means he was pre-internet era. He or she was. Oh, actually, there is he, so I have already lost that. He would show at random stores, ask questions, talk to employees, quiz customers, not his stores, like other stores, right? And then he wrote all what he heard on a yellow legal pad, and he did it continuously for, I think, 10, 20 years. And he built one of the biggest empires in the world. Sam Walton, yes. This is basically, we're talking about the founder of Walmart. And he employed, by the way, I believe 1993 is when he died. 1994 is when Amazon came in. This is my belief based on the autobiography I have read for Sam Walton. If he were alive, Amazon would not exist. Like all the principles of Amazon that you see, the 10, 15 principles, they're all derived from Sam Walton's principles of Walmart. Sam Walton actually employed computers in 1970s when they were very early in their stores. Like he was so good at reading the market, going out, gaining ideas. He was not like, okay, customers don't know what they want. Let me build what they want, right? He was not that. He actually went to his competitors and he talked to them, okay, how are you solving this big line problem? He traveled like a day to some random store that somebody told him that, okay, they have employed a new checkout process. He went there, came back, applied the whole checkout process. That's the amount of, I would say, externality that I feel growth PM should be looking at, because if you look out enough, you'll have enough ideas, right? And this is like anyway, I'm going to add a link to this article that I wrote, which is like asking customers, observing customers, asking operators. Operators means people who are already doing it, and observing operators, right? These are the ways in which you can generate a lot of ideas. I don't employ, by the way, practically, I don't employ more than 30% of what is written here. And some people from Unacademy can vet that. But I aspire to. I do know that when I'm stuck, I can go to this chart and I can just look at one of the ways to come with ideas. Right. The final thing is get better with time. We are already post some time, but there's just a single concept here, right? Which is like knowing and applying are very different things. And this, you don't need to read this whole thing, but this is like good strategy, bad strategy professor, who was like, okay, he talked to a lot of people, a lot of CEOs, and including Jobs, and all of those CEOs will spot opportunities when they arrive back in 1990s. None of the CEOs spotted opportunity like Jobs. And if you ask me, my personal opinion around why that happened is because of the muscle that Steve Jobs has built to spot opportunities in the market. And that muscle does not get built by you knowing that. Everybody knows that they have to spot opportunities. Every CEO knows. That's 101 for corporate strategy. Not enough CEOs do that. And same is true about PMs. If CEOs can't do that, who are trained for that, how can growth PMs do that if they don't apply themselves enough, right? So the idea is like, just treat this whole knowledge thing as a building a muscle and apply it using real life case studies, asking why would it fail, which is a pre-mortem analysis, build hypotheses, run experiments, read wide and deep cross-functionally, not just about product, marketing, revenue, business, everything, and understand your domain and user. These are some of the ways to sort of be good to great. Like over time, you will definitely become great, but not if you're not deliberately sort of doing some of these things, right? And let's look at the product growth cycle just to give you a sense of how you become better, because right now this is very subjective, right? How you become better, what improves over time is you'll realize that the time and cost to useful insights reduces for you. You take lesser experiments to reach, you take lesser time to reach. You have something called, people say, data hunch. You can very quickly say, okay, this data looks wrong. Can you look at it again? Like it does not look right. We all have worked with such people who are great at spotting anomalies, right? That's what happens. Your quality of ideas improves because you start drawing new analogies. You start saying, oh, no, but consumers don't like this. People in India don't play these games. Like, why are you building this, right? Prioritization becomes holistic. The confidence score in RISE framework that we all know actually improves, as does your domain, company, and user knowledge, and your prioritization becomes very holistic. Rather than guessing what the impact will be or what my confidence is and what effort is, you become very, very accurate in all that. That's what makes you a good to great PM. You become better at experiment design. Like you start seeing novelty in A/B test. Okay, initial uptick, but this is not enough. Like let's run it for longer, even if the significance is reached, right? You do back testing to tie up all the experiments you did in a particular time and say, this is the total impact that came out of it. You start removing bias in experiments by looking at the whole funnel rather than the place where you have to show the impact. So this is where like you graduate to be a great growth PM. Like you can do things which nobody else can, because you gain a deeper understanding of why something worked, why something didn't work in postmortem. or follow up, right? Now, this is like possibly, I'm going to take 1 minute to do this. I'm already slightly tired, so I'll take a break. But there is an efficient way, and this is not a sales pitch, by the way. Like, I hate sales pitches. I'm trying to build one because I felt just like Growth Catalyst and Tech Simplified, this is a big problem for PMs. And the problem is that there is no syllabus that exists. There is no objective assessment. And I'm talking about objective assessment, not subjective. Not like, okay, I know this. Do you really know this? Can you really apply this in an objective manner? Can you take this assessment, which is 50 questions long, and I will rate you how good you are as a growth PM? And believe me, like nobody has built that across the world. I'm trying to. Objective assessment for PMs. Indian case studies, they are missing throughout. Indian context, Indian user persona, everything is missing in all the courses. Growth strategy and tactics get outdated. People are still referring to 2010 Dropbox referral revenue jump. And I believe now is the time for community, Web3, and like a lot of things which are actually useful. Why are you not thinking about community plus referral? Why are you not thinking about network effects? Why are you not thinking about a lot of things that are possible now on the back of technology? GPT-3. I think the chat was just recently in news, and it's amazing product, believe me, right? So that's basically one thing. The community does not exist for product growth in India. Product growth, I'm saying. Product community, I think some people have done immensely good job for entry-level PMs, but for seasoned PMs to discuss something and debate something does not exist. And affordability is a challenge. Like I was very, paying like $2,000 a year. It takes a bit of hit on your wallet, right? And that is when you just want to learn one or like growth, right? I'm sure like I can shell out like 2,000 a year for learning a year-long course and all that, right? But that's so what I'm going to do is I'll not spend more time. I'm already feeling guilty. I will put this link here. As a true PM, I have tried to build this very unconventionally. This is basically a document, which is a PR release in Amazon's fashion, press release on what it is, how it helps and all that. It's not a website, it's nothing. If you feel it's useful for you, go ahead and read it. If you don't feel, stay with me. We are entering in what we call endgame. So recommendations, I would say there are a few recommendations which are a no-brainer, and I have put them. There are other recommendations which I'll be putting in the slides, adding in the slides as optional, and you can go and revisit. The MOM test, the only resource you need for user research. Thinking fast and slow, the only thing you need for user psychology. How to lie with statistics, it will get you from a good to an excellent place in data, right? And this guy, by the way, the guy who wrote this actually lied with statistics for tobacco industry. So don't take everything he writes, but definitely understand why he's writing what he's writing and all that. A/B testing, there is no book. ivanmiller.org does an excellent job in kind of updating the advancement in A/B testing and statistics and all that. So that's an excellent resource. Strategy, I told you, there are a couple of things that you need to read. One is Competitive Strategy by Michael Porter, and the other is Turning the Flywheel by Jim Collins. I'll add more resources.